This is the video tutorial for our second exercise. And in this exercise, you're going to learn how to create this mummy poster. This is from the original, one of the original movies featuring Boris Karloff. And before we get started, I thought I would show you where I got this image and how I set it up. Okay? And by the way, I'm going to be providing the image for you to trace, so you won't have to be setting it up. I just want to show you this because it's good to know. All right, so first of all, I found this image off of a site called drmacro.com. And Dr. Macro has all these uh, high quality stills and photographs of celebrities from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and even into the 60s. And back then, they used a lot of these are in black and white, but they used a lot of really great, dramatic, dynamic lighting. And so I picked Boris Karloff because he starred in several movies. He starred as Frankenstein. He starred as Dracula, and here's one of Frankenstein, by the way, so you can see that. Anyway, I picked this one, The Mummy, because it was a little easier to trace out. It has a very simple composition. And anyway, I downloaded this image and then I brought it into Photoshop. And so in Photoshop, what I did with this was I actually went and posterized it. And what posterize does is if you go up on Image and Adjustments and Posterize, what it will do is it will simplify an image and break it down. So this is set at 4 levels. And so we've got black, dark gray, light gray, white. Okay, so those are the 4 levels. This is a little bit more complex than the one I traced out, but one of the reasons why is because I'm going to undo this for a second. Is because I actually added a little Gaussian blur to this. And so basically, what I did was, I may already have it on there, but we're going to do another one just to simplify this a little bit more. Is we go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we'll set this really kind of low here. And you can kind of see in this preview window what it looks like. You know, it just blurs it a little bit, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Posterize again. As you can see, it makes a little less. And so each time we use the Gaussian blur, it will actually simplify it more. But you can play around with that if you want to try this. The reason I'm showing this to you is because a lot of artists use this method for creating these kind of pop art looking pictures. You may have remembered the one of Shepard Fairey's Obama Hope poster. Okay, that was maybe before your time, but that was back in 2008. And it was a very simplistic poster. It was supposed to be a screen print, but basically that's how you get this look. So let's get over into Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how we're going to make this image. So first of all, let's go over to a blank document. Now what you need to do is you need to set up a letter size document. So you want to go File and New and find a letter size document and open it up. And then what we're going to be doing is we are going to go to File and Place. Okay? Now the last time we placed this, we placed a photo of our sketch, and we just placed it. We're going to do something different this time. This time, I'm going to click on the image I'm bringing in. This one right here is called the mummy.jpg. I'll upload that for you to download in the learning path under week 3. Before I click place, or if I double click it, will place it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to check template. We don't need to check link because link means that we need to bring that with us. This will just embed it into our document, okay? So we hit place, and what it does is it places it. And if you notice, we'll go back here to Photoshop for a second. You see it's black. Well, in Illustrator, it actually fades it back, okay? It makes and we're looking at the layers palette here. I pulled it out. It makes a template layer, and then it makes another layer on top of it that you trace on top of. And if you double click the template layer, you'll see here, I'm going to double click it like this, you can see here's the word template. Now, if I uncheck, and you see it's dimmed by 50%, these are settings you need to know in case you need to dim your image more. Because sometimes I was working on an illustration last night where had placed a template of a drawing and it was just too dark, so I had to dim it more. And if you ever don't want it to be a template, you can uncheck it, by the way, and see it. There's the placed image. So I'm just going to go back here, Command Z, so we keep it like that. Anyway, what we're going to do is, first thing, we're going to build all this on one layer. And anytime you're building an illustration that's within a rectangle, I think it's a good idea to start with the rectangle first. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a rectangle over this image to be the background, okay? And so the background of this image is white, all right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull out my color palette here because we're going to be using it, all right? And what I'm going to do is we're going to go and let me show options here. And we can actually work with Grayscale if we want to. That's what we're going to be working with at first here. But let's turn off the stroke. And now we can't see white off a white background. All right? I'll move that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this 10% black, because we're going to use that later on. We're going to designate that a color, okay? And so anything that's going to be white in this tracing is going to be 10% black. Now, what we're going to do is you can't see what you trace because we are in preview mode. Well, what I'm going to do is I am going to go to outline mode. And there's a few ways to go about getting to outline mode. One is going view and outline. And here you can see the vector shape, okay? I'm going to go back here to GPU view. The other way is doing Command Y, okay? See Command Y or Control Y if you're on PC. So that goes back and forth like that, and I'm just hitting that back and forth. So anyway, the other way, and this is the way I kind of prefer when I'm working, especially if I'm working with my mouse and I've got one hand on the keyboard. So I hold down the Command key and I come over here and I click on the eye. So this will say toggle visibility, okay? And what it will do is it will turn it to outline mode. See the eye, how it's changed? I'm going to go back here, click on it again. See the eye is full. Now some students in the past, when I've been teaching this, they will just click like this without holding down the Command key. And what that will do is it turns off the layer and you can't work. So let's go back here. This is outline mode. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to be tracing. And the way we need to trace this thing out is we're going to be stacking shapes. So this is very important. We're going to be making a big dark gray shape. I'm going to zoom in here, and you see this gray here and this gray here. Well, that gray is actually a big shape. And the black shape, or this really dark gray shape, which is going to be our black, is smaller and sits on top. So when we trace this out, I would recommend that you start with this big gray shape. And so I'm going to start on the outside, and I'll explain that later of why it's good to do that. And I'm going to just do some tracing here. Now you can zoom in. And when you zoom in, one of the things that will happen is if you continue over here, notice what happens. We're no longer connected, okay? So we've got a big gap in between those. So anytime you are actually tracing stuff, and you can click and then move. Now, by the way, you can always edit these things, and sometimes it's best to just trace the thing out and edit it later and see if it needs editing. One other mistake I've had students make in the past was I've actually had some students trace it like this. And as you can see there, that gets a little monotonous. It looks really super, finely detailed, but all the one of the things is that by having all these anchor points, it adds a lot of memory to the file, because the more anchor points you have, the bigger your file is. Now, mind you, we're fine with that, and I'm just undoing here for a second here, because we can zoom in as closely as we want to and do stuff like this.
I already have this traced out, and I was just showing you how to trace it out. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking, holding down my mouse, and then coming back to this and clicking on this point right here, like we've done in the past. And I've explained that over and over again about how to go back and actually kill or delete that second handle. And so as you can see here, and what I'm doing, by the way, is I'm actually to move the canvas, I go to the space bar, and it temporarily, as I hold it down, becomes the grabber hand. So as I'm going up here, I hold down with my space bar, pull down with my mouse, and then I come up here, and then I can work very quickly going around this. Okay, and this will take some time. I'm not going to trace the whole thing out because, as they do in cooking shows, they always have something in the oven already. And so that's what we're going to go to in just a second. But I just thought I would do a little tracing here to show you what you're going to be having to do here and what you're going to have to encounter. And mind you, we can trace straight if we need to. You see, some of these are going straight, some of these are going curved, and there's a multiple ways you can trace this out. You want to look fairly close to what you're tracing out. Now, sometimes I'll do this. Now, I'll explain this. I see a curve here. Now, what I could do is I could go over here and try to get a curve like this, okay? Or I could aim for the middle and pull out like this, and then come over here and see that's where my handle's going to go there. And you know what? I could do another handle and kind of continue on. Because sometimes this is what I will do to get a nice smooth transition between one curve to the next. Is I won't go back and kill the handle unless I really need to. I'll just keep pulling out a handle, so it just sort of kind of continues my curve around. So like I said, there's multiple ways to doing this, and I'm just trying this method for the moment. This would be straight, and then let's say we go back and we decide, okay, I want to kill the handle and go back here. Okay, so like I said, there are just so many ways to trace this out, and let's zoom out here and see how much more there is to trace. Because as you can see, this is going to go all the way up and around here, and this is going to take some time. I'm not going to do the whole thing now because I'm going to go jump to my second one here that I have set up. But anyway, just think about it like this. This is like going along a road, and this is a map. And so you're going to be going all the way around this dark gray shape, okay? So anyway, let's go on to our second one here. I think I have it set up here. Here's, Mummy Tracing Demo. Okay, so I've traced him out quite a bit here. We'll zoom in. Now remember, if you're using another tool, unless you're just using the space bar as the grabber hand, because that's the great thing about it is that you're still selected to your path. But let's say we're starting off again. Remember the last time. If you just click over here, though you don't see any anchor points selected. So that's why if you use the zoom tool, make sure you go back and you get on top of that anchor point, and it will actually tell you anchor point here, and then you can click. And by the way, sometimes this stuff, I've been having difficulties because sometimes the smart guides are getting in my way when I'm tracing, especially when I'm trying to get into things and it's telling me things. You can actually turn off these smart guides, okay? You can go to View, Smart Guides, or as you can see here, it is Command U, okay? And so now I don't see those smart guides. Okay, now, when we encounter the edge, the border, okay, instead of trying to actually get on this border and go like this, there's sometimes what may happen is it may be off by just a little bit. And you see that wasn't on it, and I tried to be on it. I didn't have my smart guides telling me, but the thing is that one of the reasons why I go all the way outside here is because we're going to crop it later. Okay, so let me go back here and click on this one, and we'll zoom out just a little bit. All right, and by the way, when I zoomed out that time, I didn't use my zoom tool. I actually used Command plus and minus, and so that's another way to kind of zoom in and out, especially when you're doing this.
And then one of the main things we're going to do is we need to close our path, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and you see that this is going to be, see that little zero there? That closes the path. All right. So now this is finally traced out. Imagine that I took all that time to trace that out. That would have been a long, boring lecture there, now wouldn't it? So anyway, let's continue on. Now, after we have traced it out, I've already got a color in it, but let's say we had set to what the background was, okay? And if we go, what we're going to do is as soon as you build a shape and you close it, you want to go back to preview mode. So I'm going to hold down my command key, click on this so we can preview it. And most likely, if you were tracing this, this is what would be happening, okay? You would have this 10% black shape on top of a 10% black shape, and you wouldn't be able to see it, okay? Because it would just kind of meld into there, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go and turn this to, let's say 50, okay? And then what we would do is we would go and hold down the command key and then zoom in here, and then we would click and trace out the next shape, okay? And I'm going to trace out the next shape here. Hopefully we won't be spending too long on this, so let's go here. The other thing too is there's different ways to trace this out. I'm not using any curves right now, and I actually did a tracing here. I'll show you just a second where there's no curves. I just click straight, and it actually looked pretty good because you may be working with a touchpad versus a mouse, and that touchpad may be a little hard to do all these curves, and you may get a little tired of doing the curves. So you could actually go through, and I'm going to take my time here and get this a little bit better here. You could actually take your time and just click like what I'm doing here, and you'll get a nice look. Now I'm going to mix this up a bit, okay? And it depends on how close you want to zoom in, because the closer we are zoomed in here, and mind you, I'm using my zoom tool, so I'm going to have to go back here because otherwise, if I continue on, see, it deselects it, and we'd be starting a new path. And I'm going to show you also what you can do if you make the mistake of doing that, okay? Because that was one thing that students used to do all the time, and it's just there's mistakes you make. You're new to this, and you need to know how to fix your mistakes, and so that's one of the things I want to do in this tutorial: show you ways to fix mistakes. So see, I can actually zoom in a lot. Let's zoom back out, and I'm going to just kind of be quick about this because this shape is not as big and doesn't have as many points once we get finished compared to the first dark gray shape. So we're actually working larger because we started working with the background, and we're working in. Think of it like that, okay? We're starting with the larger shapes, and we're working towards the smallest shapes. And so I'm just going to make this here. We'll curve a little bit occasionally just to show you. Okay, go back here. Maybe curve this here like this. I didn't even go back and kill the handle because sometimes as you go through, you can see kind of how the path is going to curve. Okay, I'm getting close here. Yeah, this is not going to take much longer. All right, if I want to do a curve here, I'll do this. Now, it takes a long time to trace this out, of course, but one of the great things about Illustrator is that once you have something made, if you need to correct it, you don't have to erase. You just go in and you pull those points around and you fix things, okay? And also, coloring is so easy because, once a shape is made, it's so quick to color it compared to coloring it in Photoshop. So let's go around here. We're almost done here. And this shape will go straight down, so we can go here. We can interpret this. See, I mean, that's the thing I want you to understand is that you can make you can be making decisions on how this thing is drawn out here. Okay. Now this will go in. Now in this case here, this shape goes in. If we wanted this little part, which I really don't think is that important, but I'm going to trace it out anyway, then we would come back in and trace it. Okay, like this. So let's go around here. And then we'll go back out. Okay. Later on, we will crop all this.
That's why I'm kind of going out like this. All right, as soon as we finish this shape off, and I just closed it, as you can see here, okay, you want to go back to preview mode, okay? So we want to hold down our command key, click on this, and this is so important because if you're just tracing all your shapes out, you'll get done and you won't be able to see anything because all your shapes are going to be the same color, okay? The same value. And so this we're going to make black, and then we would continue on, all right? And so let me go back here. And so I would continue building on top of this, all right? Now, I think this kind of gives you an idea of what you're doing here. I'm going to zoom out so you can see it. You see what I got built here. All right, now I've got one here. First of all, let me show you the choppy tracing, okay? Actually, it will show you. So this is my final tracing. Whoop, no, that's the bad tracing. I'm going to show you how to fix that one. All right, so this is the good tracing here that I did yesterday. And by the way, I actually used my pencil tool on parts of it because it's a little faster because I'm just tracing around quickly with my pencil tool, and I'm using my Cintiq. So if anybody's got a Cintiq, you could actually trace out with the pencil tool. You just got to make sure all your paths are closed, okay? But anyway, let me go back over to this choppy one because let's look at the difference here. So this is the one that I traced yesterday. This one I just did today. I didn't trace out the whole thing, but this has no curves in it. And you know what? It actually looks pretty good. You know, it's like seriously, it's like it just depends upon what you're looking for. My main thing with this tutorial and the exercise that you're doing is I want you to make it look as close to the image as possible, but there's room for interpretation. Okay? So anyway, let's go over to, let's see, that was the one we just did. This was the choppy one. This is tracing demo 2. Okay. Now in this part here, I've had students in the past where this would occur. And what would happen is they were not aware that they were not that the path they were making was a new path. Like they would use the zoom tool, like I was showing you, instead of going back to the original anchor point, they didn't. So in this case, let's go to outline mode. And so what we would need to do is, if you're running into that problem, because what it does here, before I do this, is that you have to understand, one of the reasons we're closing all our paths is because when you have an open path, one of the things that will occur is in preview mode, if you've got a fill in it, it's going to fill that path from one endpoint to the next, and it's going to just do a straight line. Okay, that's why this does not look right. And the other thing I used to have students do was I used to have them, they would select everything and group it and see if that would help them, and nope, that wouldn't help them. So anyway, let's go and fix this thing. It's so simple to fix. We'll go back in here, we'll zoom in, because occasionally things go awry. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pen tool, and it lets me know when I'm on top of that. Now, I turned off my smart guides. We'll turn them back on here. All right, so let's go back to our smart guides here. There they are. This will give us, yeah, see, it gives me the anchor point, tells me I'm on it. I'm going to click on it. You know, we can curve that a little bit if we want to. We can curve this a little bit if we're being really picky here. And then we can go to this and connect that together, okay? And so let's zoom out here and see if there's anything else that there isn't other places where it did not connect well, and I can see that one, but let's just see what it looks like now. So that looks a lot better, but see, we've got two separate paths again, okay? So what we want to do is we want to go in here. We'll get this bigger portion first, because the other portion is just very minute, okay? So we're going to just go here and then end it there. And by the way, see this? If you get in here and you want to correct something, you can always go in and use your direct selection tool. That's the white arrow here. Click on anchor point and move things around. Okay. Now I did another thing too that was wrong, and we'll see what that is in just a moment. But let me go back over here. And we'll see the end point there. Okay. So this is another end point that I'm going to close up here. Okay. So you can always go in, click on the end point, make sure you're on it when you click, and then you can go in and see that 0 there that says that we're going to close it. That little circle there. Okay? And if we were going to correct the handle on this, we could do this. Okay?
And if we need to correct anything, and I'm just being picky here because I'm just showing you what you can do if you need to fix things. Okay, you can always take those handles and move them around, and then fix things. Okay, now let's zoom out here and see what we got here. Now let's go and do this. Let's see here. Okay, now something's gone on here, and you may notice it, and that is I actually have shapes here that are not showing up. And that's because I built them in the wrong order, okay? And mind you, that will occur sometimes. You make a smaller shape and then it gets hidden by a bigger shape that's overlapping it, okay? So if that's the case, you could always move these things. So like all these little shapes right here, what we're going to do is in outline mode, I'm going to select them, okay? We'll select them. I can use the direct selection tool to select them with. We'll go back to preview mode, and if we want to, we can just bring that to the front, or we can cut it. This is another method for moving things. So I'm going to do Command X, and then I'm going to select that big black shape, and I'm going to do Command F, which is paste in front, and there it is. Okay, and that's how, if you need to move things, that's how we can move things. Okay, and by the way, I just wanted to show you paste in front. Command F is right there. Here's paste. Here's copy. There's cut. So there's all those keyboard shortcuts. Okay. So anyway, this is pretty close. I think there were some other things I just didn't finish on this. Yeah, that one right there. But anyway, let's get on to our finished one here, and that is this. Okay. So after you spin, it may take you a couple hours. It may take 2 to 3 hours to trace this out good and get everything right. But once you get this done, you'll have something like this. So one of the first things we're going to do is we are going to crop, okay? And we've cropped before, or I've shown you how to crop, but I want to make sure you understand how to do this. So what we do is we can select the big rectangle, and then we'll select the gray first. And then we're going to do Shift M, and Shift M is the keyboard shortcut for our shape builder tool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that over the gray area that is overlapping and goes outside the border there. I'm holding down my Alt key or my Option key. Okay, both on my keyboard it says both. All right, and therefore I get that. Now we'll deselect that one. We'll select the big rectangle and now the black shape. And the black shape, came out twice, and so let's just do Shift M again, and then go over to here and hold down the Alt key, and that's how we're going to get rid of that. Okay, that one's separate because I thought those were connected, but they're not connected. So we're going to just do this, and then Shift M, and get rid of that. Okay, and so that's how you can quickly crop and make it really clean. And I think that's the fastest way, because if you've got a lot of shapes that go outside of your border of your background rectangle, and then it's just so much faster to crop that way. So anyway, let's continue on. And what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be coloring. Okay. Now, one of the things we want to do is when we color is before we color, we built this all in grayscale because it's faster. Because if you're sitting there trying to decide what color each shape is going to be after you make it, then that slows you down. So to speed up things, we build in grayscale. One of the things we want to make sure is we want to make sure that all these grays are the same. Because what we've got here is we've got black shapes, okay? We've got these shapes that are going to kind of represent white, but they're actually going to represent a light color, and that's 10%. And then we've got these medium ones here, 50% here, 50% here, And what we want to do is we want to get to them and start coloring. So the fastest way to select them is using your magic wand. Okay? So we go over here to our toolbar. I'm going to actually change my toolbar so it's more like this. And let me get the magic wand here. Right there it was. Okay. Now the keyboard shortcut for that, by the way, is Y. And I think it's the best thing to do when you're coloring is this. Is you want to select the middle gray. Okay? So we'll select that gray right there. And what it did was I clicked that, it selected all those gray shapes. Well, I had done this in grayscale sliders. I'm going to change this to CMYK. Yours will most likely be like this, okay? And so what we can do is I'm going to actually pull this down a little bit more here. And we're just going to choose color out here. Now, here's the deal. We want to pick a color that is lighter than black and darker than that light gray, okay? So whatever color we're picking here, you know, we want it to be that the same value as 50% black, okay? We don't want to make it lighter, okay? And we don't want to try to make it any darker. We want enough contrast in between, okay? So what I'm going to do is let's pick out something here that looks halfway decent, you know? We can always go in here and manipulate our CMYK too. So if we wanted to bring that up so it's a little bit more violet, I'm bringing up the magenta there. All right, so anyway, that looks good. Now, let's go to our lighter color, and we'll do the same thing. I'm going to go and go down to CMYK. And like I said, most likely, since I didn't show you to switch all your sliders over to grayscale, this is what you'll see. You won't have to be switching out. And we'll just pick a lighter blue here. But see, it needs to be lighter, okay? So we get something like this. There we go. Okay? Now, black can actually be a color. Okay? That's why I say it like that. Because, you know, we only have, you know, these 4 colors here, you know. So, well, actually it's 3 colors. We got a light gray, we got a middle gray, and we got a and then we've got that. So what we're going to do is, let's get this. Hold on here. I'm getting a little confused. Don't worry. We'll go to CMYK, and then we'll just pick a darker blue here. All right, now, mind you, something went awry, and this didn't get chosen. That is because that was set to CMYK. So I'm going to change all that. Now, we're going to color this and show it 4 times. So let's zoom out here. And one of the things we're going to do is, let's move this, okay? Now, we don't need our template anymore, so it doesn't need to be aligned up with it, okay? And if we want to, we can turn off our template layer. But what I'm going to do is, we could shrink this so it fits in, or we could blow it up. I want to put 4 of these here. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll take this one, okay? And then I'm going to actually duplicate my layer like this. I'm going to lock layer 1 here for a moment. And then I'm going to select everything on this layer. And a quick way to select everything on a layer is to click this little circle right here. All right, that's selected everything. And then we're just going to move this over here, hold down the shift key, and so we'll get another one. We're going to color that. But before we color that, let's change our artboard. Okay? Now, since we're not having to print these things, we can just alter our artboard. And the way to alter our artboard is we go down here to this tool here, the page tool, and we'll drag this over just like, it's almost like in Photoshop when you're cropping. You know, or actually we could take the crop tool and make the size larger. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to move this down here. Oops, I made another artboard by mistake. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to do this. We'll zoom out a little bit here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to duplicate these 2 here. Make this very simple here. I'm going to lock both of those. I'm going to drag both those layers into this plus sign down here. And that's a really quick way to duplicate those 2 layers, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock both of them. And we're just going to move these down here like this. And so what I'm doing is I'm holding down my shift key as I'm moving it so it constrains it, so it keeps it straight up and down so it will be aligned the same, okay? Now, let's go back to our page tool, and we'll just crop in a little bit more. Okay. So we got a border like that. There we go. Okay, now what we're going to do is, the next thing is we're going to do 4 different color versions because that's our next step. So like in here, you see I got 4 different color versions, okay? So right now I've got a, you know, kind of a more blue scheme. It leans a little bit towards violet in some of the darker areas. But anyway, we're going to go about one at a time here. So the first one
is this one. We'll just leave that locked. We'll lock the other two because we're going to color this one. And what we're going to do is, it's important to lock them because what we're going to do is we're going to use that magic wand tool. So first color we can choose, I always think it's kind of best to choose the middle color because it's so much quicker because that's going to have the most color in it. You know, it's hard to see a color when it's really dark or when it's really light. So let's make it maybe something like that, okay? And then I'm going to go over here and let's select another lighter color here. You know, we can mix this up a bit, or we can just go lighter so it's like more of a pinkish color, okay? And maybe I might want to leave that background blue, you know? Because what we're trying to do is just create different color schemes. But if we want to, we can change that. We can change all that's dark here, and we'll go down here and make it, you know, slightly different color here. So that's one way to do it, okay? So that doesn't look half bad. The main thing is this. We do not want to swap our values. So that in no way do we want, and let's go down here. We'll click on, I think it's this one right here. Nope, it's this one right here. Okay. And then we unlock it. So let's say we're going to color these lighter areas. We would not want to color these lightest areas to be darker than our midtone, okay? We don't want to be swapping values, okay? And see how unusual that looks? Now, that look is kind of cool in some respects, depending upon what you're going for. But for what we're going for, we need it to be lighter, okay? You may see this look in some things where it's like maybe it's a rock poster from the 60s, you know, something more psychedelic, or it's a punk rock poster from the 70s. Anyway, we want to keep this so it's lighter. So let's go over here. We'll make this kind of a lighter green, perhaps. Now let's go and get our magic wand again. We'll do Y. We'll click on this one. Nope, we're going to click on this light gray here. And then we're going to pick a kind of a darker green here. Maybe that green goes more towards blue. So I'm just picking color. This is what I love about Illustrator is it's so fast to color things once you get them done. And so let's go over here and we're going to maybe make this one, let's see here, a little darker version of that, or maybe it leans more towards that. Yeah, that's kind of nice. And we'll see what that looks like. Ooh, that's not bad. So see, I've got three different color versions. This final version, you know, I'm going to just play around and we'll mix up colors. Because remember before, it kind of looked nice that this was one color here. Oops, I'm going to start with the middle one here. I think it's always important to do that. Okay, so let's say, oops, I actually started with the other one. All right, there we go. Now, let's pick out maybe something more orangey. And let's make it just a little bit more darker there. Okay. And then let's go and make this one maybe more towards yellow. Okay. It could be, yeah, maybe it's more of a greenish yellow or something like that. See? And then we're going to go in and take the darker color and maybe make it kind of a dark red. The main thing is that these will work as long as there's enough contrast between your shapes. Okay, that's so key here. And because I actually posterized this at level 3 versus level 4, so that's one of the reasons why we've only got black, gray, and white. It makes our life a lot easier. That was the little thing I was confused about because I was showing you one that had level 4. Anyway, let me play around with this for just a second. Maybe we might want to take this down a little bit more so it's a little bit more yellowish. There we go. All right, just as long as we got enough contrast. So, the next thing we want to do is we want to do gradients. Okay? Because I haven't really talked much about gradients. And let me show you what I have set up here. So I actually put a gradient in the background of some of these, and then others I actually colored a little bit more. So let me go to this color version here, and we'll play around with gradients. Okay. Now before we go to doing gradients, one of the things that I think is important is I'm going to drag my gradient tool out here, and I'm going to tuck it up underneath my color palette because both of those are going to work hand in hand. And as I was showing you how
to set up your palettes, or how I set up my palettes in the first tutorial. Um, last Our first exercise tutorial. This has its purpose. Okay. Now I can get rid of the rest of these if I want to, but I'm just going to leave them open. So first thing is let's add a gradient to our first one. And actually, see, I actually rearranged these so they're set up like this, but it doesn't matter how your layers are arranged as long as each of these are on a separate layer. That's the most important thing. And we keep the other layers locked while we work on one, okay? So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to drag this blue. Now, first of all, we could put a gradient in like that. All right. Now, in order to color this, so it's not we're using black, because a gray gradient is kind of ugly. We want color there. So one way we can do is we can go in here and double click this little thing that they call a slider. I don't know if that's what they still call it. Gradient slider, yep, because you can slide them around, all right? Anyway, I'm going to double click it, and we can pick a lighter blue here, or we can make a blue up here. And see, that's why I like to have this up, because the color palette works hand in hand with the gradient palette, okay? And so we can always just pick a color like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the direction of that gradient. Because right now it's at the default. It's going from left to right, lighter to darker, okay? Well, let's get our gradient tool. G is a keyboard shortcut. And as you can see here, we've actually got the sliders. You can actually manipulate these. But what we're going to do is we're going to click down at the bottom here and drag upwards like this and hold down our shift key. Now, one of the problems is that not everything got selected here, okay? Because there are other colors in here that are a light blue that did not get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go zoom in here. Oops. Get my zoom tool here, zoom in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my magic wand, and I'm going to select all these light blue shapes that were the same color and value as the background. And I'll use my eyedropper. And now they got a gradient in it, but let's take a look what's wrong here. All right, see the gradient's at the default. Well, here's the deal. We can actually, I'm going to click this here. So now I've got all my gradient shapes that are that color gradient selected. I'm going to go back to my gradient tool and just hold G down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. If they're all selected at once, we're going to change the direction of all of them all at once. And so you'll get this. And now let's click off of that. And now that looks a lot better, okay? And so we can have a gradient kind of going like that. And we can also, if we want to, we can make changes. We can always make changes to it. And so the problem is, if we're changing them, let's say I was going to change them, you saw all the lines there. It'd be so hard to go in and change each one individually. But that's why we got the gradient palette. So if we wanted to make this, and we'll go to CMYK here, up in the color palette, and we wanted to make that just a light blue, okay, and then have this as our darker blue, like that, we can do that. All right, see, I can make my changes like that. All right, now, I like that one, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so we'll unlock that, and we'll make a change with this background, and we'll go the opposite way, okay? Let me take a peek and see how I've done this. Okay, yeah, all right, so I went lighter on top. So anyway, let's go get this shape. And we'll actually just go and instead of clicking on the background shape, let's use our magic wand. So we'll select all those same colors. And then what we're going to do is, this is a trick that I've used a long time ago, and that is I'm going to click on the fill box in the color palette and drag it all the way down into here, and it will drag in and make that. Now, here's one of the problems is sometimes it will do this. Okay, so I've got multiple colors in there, okay? And maybe I might want that, okay? Maybe I might want it going from a blue to a yellow. It has a nice look to it. But in case I didn't want that, I can just click on this slider and drag it out, okay? Now, we cannot drag out 2 sliders. If you got 2 sliders, that's the minimum. So if you got any more, let's say we put another slider in here, we can always drag out the third slider, the fourth slider, the fifth slider, whatever we got here. But anyway, let's change this to maybe we can go white, or we can go real light yellow, and maybe make this one a little darker yellow. So this goes maybe more this kind of greenish yellow. And then let's change the direction. We'll go G for our gradient tool, and we're going to drag these all the same time and hold down your shift key so it will do this. All right? And see what I'm talking about? All those gradient bars. And so if we were going to go in here, we'd have to click on one and then change each one individually. Well, no, we can just do them all at once over here. Okay, so it makes it so much easier. All right, so if we click off the gradient tool here for a second, we'll just click on the direct selection tool. Let me make sure that these are all selected here. Yep. Okay, those are all selected. Then if we wanted to change this color and maybe put a little magenta in there, we could do that. Or maybe we'll put the magenta here. Okay. Yeah, I kind of like that look. That's not a bad look. And by the way, you can always swap. Like if you don't like the direction of your gradient, you can always swap it like that. Right? I'm just clicking that button. But in this case, I wanted the darker to be down at the bottom. Okay. And so let's take a peek at that. That's not bad. All right. So let's go and do another one here. Now this one, we're going to have a little bit more fun with, and that is we're going to be changing the direction of all of our gradients. We're going to put gradients on every single thing here. So let's unlock this. We'll lock that one up on top. We'll unlock this one. We'll click on this. I'm going to drag this pinkish color down into here. Okay. And I always double check and see if it has another one. And we'll just click that off there. So we've got that pink color. Now what I can do is this. I can actually take both pink colors here. All right. And then I can actually choose like one of these and make it darker. Okay. Now one way is I could double click it. I can even sample off another thing here. So let's say I'm going to sample. Let me see if it will let me sample here. Because I clicked that. Yeah. All right. So I actually sampled it. So it went from that. So it actually picked up that red there. Okay. So now let's change the direction of that gradient. Go on our gradient tool and change it so it maybe goes this way. Or maybe we might want to go in this way. Okay. And then we can click off it. Now, if you want to see it and you don't want to click off of it, if you do Command H, that hides our selection. We're supposed to hide the selection there, but actually it didn't. So here we go. All right, we'll make sure that Command H is turned off there. So see, that has a nice look to it. So it's going from that kind of pinkish salmon color to this orange color. Now let's go and get the other middle color that we had sampled off of. Get that one, okay? Now let's go over to here, and we're going to click on this, and we'll just double click it. I think you could actually do this. Yeah, there we go. And we're going to pick this darker color. So it's going to go from that red, that color red, to a darker red. And so let's get our gradient tool, G. And we want these gradients all going in the same direction, right? Because that is like our light source, okay? And so now that will go there. We can actually drag here, because what this will do is this drags the middle color, okay? So, or not the middle color, but the midpoint. So and we can actually pull that maybe down more like that. And we'll take a peek here to see what it looks like. Okay, so that's what I've got. So now let's go in here, and we're going to get our magic wand again and click on the darker color here. And in this darker color, we're going to drag that color down to one of these sliders here. Okay, there we go. So that's our darker color. And this, I'm just going to put more black into it. Let's see what that looks like. And now let's get our gradient tool, G, and then we'll just click and drag all the way down. All right, and we'll see what that looks like. And we can always undo it or adjust it. That's not bad. I like that. Let's click on this again, And let's go over here. I'm going to take some of the black down just a little bit. All right, we'll take the black down. Maybe bring up the blue, the cyan. Okay. I'm just dragging that down just a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So see, I got a gradient now on in each of those shapes, and you get a much more dramatic look there. Okay. Now in this last one, what we'll do is we will do the same thing, but we're going to use a radial gradient. So let's lock that last one. We'll come over here. All right. And let's start off with a gradient. We'll drag this color into one of these. I'm going to pull this over and drag out that other slider that I had underneath it. Okay. Let's go here and let's pick another kind of color, maybe more towards an orange, or we could always pick up this orange. That's what we were doing before. There we go. But we're going to choose a different gradient here. We want to do a radial gradient, okay? So I'm going to make it a radial gradient. And a radial gradient, what we're going to do with it is we're going to drag it from here to this, so it looks like the sun is hitting him to here. So that has a nice look. All right. Now, and you can see the whole gradient, how it all is. We'll get more into gradients in another project here, but anyway, I just wanted to show you that one. Now, so let's continue on. We'll select that. We can actually maybe use the same gradient here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and then we'll swap it. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to take that same color here, drag it into that one. There we go. And that didn't make another slider this time. And always double check that anytime you're dragging your color into these sliders to make sure it didn't make another slider. All right, so let's just make this a little darker here. Maybe a little more. And if we want to pick off of our color, we could do that. Now let's go and get our gradient tool. G is our keyboard shortcut, and we'll go from here to here. Let's see what look we get here, okay? Oh, that looks nice. Looks very nice. Okay, so now we got two radial gradients in those three sets, or those two sets of shapes, my lighter, my midtones. Now let's do it in the darkest one, okay? So we'll click on that. We can drag this dark blue into the darker blue here. Oops, see, I didn't get it all the way over there, so let's drag that out. What I might want to do is we'll just choose another color here. Maybe it's going more towards a reddish to a blue, and maybe this blue actually has, maybe it's a little bit less blue, maybe it's more like that. Anyway, let's get our gradient tool, G, and then we'll drag all the way like this. Okay, and so that's how we would make our poster to look, and we can always adjust our colors so easily, because this is the great thing about Illustrator. It's not like Photoshop where you're kind of stuck with what you have and you have to go back in and repaint it. No, we're going to actually go in and we can actually make changes here. So maybe we could put a little more yellow in that. Okay, and so that actually makes that look better. All right, so now the last thing we're going to do is if you take a look at this, we're going to work with text. Okay, it's so important. Many of you probably have not had typography, or maybe you had it, but you haven't had layout. And so let's go over and we're going to do 4 different text treatments. First of all, we're going to type in the mummy, and let's go over to our first blue one here. And actually, you know what? This is better to be done on a separate layer. So we're going to make a new layer here, and we're going to get our text tool. Now, some teachers talk about clicking and dragging and making a text box, but really you don't need to do that. All you got to do is click, okay? And then you get this that pops up. So we're going to type in THE, and then we hit return, mummy, okay? And I did lowercase. We could do lowercase, but I'm going to do all caps here because we're going to play around with different things. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is let's bring up our character palette. Now, let's make this large enough so we can see it. I don't have my character palette open yet, but I just want to make this large enough so we can see it for a second. We'll pull this over here. Okay, we're going to need to make that smaller, but let's make it small enough so that we can see it. We'll move it in like this. Maybe make that. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, one of the things we want to do is we want to go in and we're going to make some changes to our leading. But I want to. You've got all these controls up here, but I like to use the text tools or the text palette. So I'm going to do Command T, which will just bring it up, and you have everything here. So it's a little easier to manage because a lot of times when you're picking a font, you can't see it because this may be overlapping your font, like it's doing here. See, that overlaps it. Well, I'm over here, and it doesn't overlap it. All right, so I can actually, I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see it's just picking different fonts as I'm going through here, and you can see the effect. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have you work with, put it to you this way. First of all, in case you don't know anything about fonts, there are two types of fonts. And then there's some other fonts outside of those two types. But the two main types is you got serif and you got sans serif. Okay? So a sans serif is this. Arial is a sans serif, okay? And it has no feet, it has no little things on the ends, okay? All right, so that's Arial black. And actually, you know what? We could use Arial black for our first one. So we'll use a sans serif for our first one here. And let's use Arial black, okay? It's a nice, thick font there. And one of the things is we'll need to make it a little smaller. Now here's one of the things you can do. And that is, this is dealing with kind of hierarchy. Because I know in typography they got type traditional and they got type hierarchy. But before we do anything, let's play around here. And we're going to play around with the leading. Because right now it's kind of more on a default leading. This right here is our leading. Okay, set leading. Well, you know, if we're typing out a paragraph, we may want that much space between each line, but when it comes to a title, we don't want that, okay? Now, the other thing I was talking about was hierarchy. Maybe, why should we emphasize the as much as mummy? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to de-emphasize the and make it smaller. Like that, okay? And we'll bring that over here, and we could probably even tighten up the lighting a little bit more. And so we'll tighten it up just a little bit more like that, okay? There we go. So that looks a lot better. Now let's zoom in here. Get my zoom tool. Okay, so one thing is that every font is different. And the way, when you type something out, you've got to look at the spaces in between. And if you're looking at this, you know, you may go, well, what's he talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is, you know, sometimes these things are a little uneven, and it's partially due to how the fonts are relating to each other, like this Y and this M, okay? So it looks like this Y and this M are closer than these others here, so we can adjust what they call kerning, okay? Now you can go over here and adjust your kerning. So you set kerning. Kerning is the spacing between each individual letter, okay? Tracking, by the way, is the spacing between all the letters on a line, all right? But we're going to adjust our kerning, and one easy way to do that is by clicking in between the letters and holding it on the Alt key and clicking on one of your arrows. I'm going to click on my keyboard. I'm going to click the left arrow, and see I just brought that in a little bit. Now I'm just going to use that arrow to navigate here, and I'm going to bring this in a little bit. Okay. Now this is what they call kerning, and it's so key. It's so important to kern all your text to make sure. See, we might want to tighten this up a little bit. Okay, so because that is the job of a graphic designer. That is the first thing you should do. Anytime somebody gives you text, you need to sit in there and look at it and see how's the leading look, how's the kerning look, and see that doesn't look bad right there, okay? All right, now let's go on and we'll copy this and let's alter the text. We'll alter the layout just a little bit here. So we'll bring this over here. And all I did was I held down my shift, I started dragging it, and then I held down my shift key and my alt key so it copied it. All right? So and it went directly across at the same angle. Okay, so now let's pick another font. All right, now we got our layout. I want to pick a serif font for this one, or another. Maybe it's another sans serif. I want to do 2 serifs and 2 sans serifs. Ooh, that kind of look nice. Now it depends upon what you have, because I don't expect you guys to have the same fonts as I do. And there are some standard fonts that come with your computer. They also come with the Adobe Creative Suite, but you can't all. You know, one of the standard fonts is, if we go through here. See, I can go pretty quickly here. Ooh, that copper plate. I'm gonna try and look for a. Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna use a serif font. Okay, so one of the serif fonts I have on mine is Garamond. Okay, Garamond, and you may not have it, but see the difference between a sans serif font and a serif font is serifs have those little things, those little feet. Okay, and those were from earlier on. And there's a whole type history thing I could talk about, but I'm going to move on here a little quickly. But see, I changed this to a serif font. Oops. I wanted to make sure. Let's go. I think I should have hit return. So let's go down here to Garamond. There's Gil Sans. Gil Sans is another one of those. See, Giddy Up. It's kind of cool. It's like if you're doing cowboy things. But see, that's not a serif, and that's not a sans serif. You know, that's a different category unto itself. It's more of a script font. So let's go to Garamond here. We got Adobe Garamond. Let's see what that looks like. Because they got a bold here. Ooh, I like that. We'll use that for this, okay? If you've got it, that's great. If you don't, then look for a thicker serif font. And as you can see here, you know, the kerning is different. So let's change it here. And what we're going to do is just click in here and hold down the Alt key and space it out a little bit better here, okay? Every time you get type, now mind you, it was kerned according to the last font. And the other thing I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to change this so this is in the middle here. Let me go and change that. We're going to go to paragraph. And we're going to go to align center. Oops. Actually, you know what? We'll align the whole thing center. We'll do that. Align the whole thing centered. There we go. Okay. Now let's drag that up back over here like this. Because there's just so many ways to treat it. You know? That when you're dealing with 2 words, there's so many options you have as far as the type of font you use, how big the letters are, you know, and we're going to actually space that a little bit more, space this out a little bit more here, okay. Maybe these are lowercase, like that. Let's see if I can adjust the kerning on that, because sometimes these get a little picky here, and they don't like to have the kerning adjusted. And if that's the case, then we can always do this. Because it did not want the kerning adjusted, so I put a space in there, and then I could adjust the kerning. So maybe it's the mummy like that. Okay? And I'm just playing around here. And one of the other things is I could maybe, I'm just playing around, make the M big. We'll go back to character here. So I just want to show you, like, you know, a lot of students will just type out the title, leave it. They won't kern, they won't track, and they won't play around with hierarchy. And it's so cool because you can do so much with these things here. So I'm going to make this a little smaller so it fits in there better. And then I'm going to make this a little smaller. There we go. That looks nice. Okay. Now because that M is so much bigger, I'm going to make it a little, I'm going to bring in the space in between. So I'm going to kern that. All right. Now I might want to adjust the leading. Now, I don't know if I can, but let's see if we can here. We'll get that here. We'll see what, yeah, there we go. I could do it like that, or maybe I'll just do it so it's like this. I'm just playing around. And then we'll move that into its space like that. Okay. And let's zoom out here and take a look at that. And that doesn't look bad.
Okay, and we can make other alterations to it later. But I want you to experiment with 4 different treatments of the title. And this one, again, we're going to use maybe another type of font here. Now, I have Impact. I don't know if you have Impact on yours, but Impact is a really nice kind of font. It's got that kind of movie title font look, okay? So let's use Impact on this one. And let's play around with the size. We're gonna increase the size of both the and Mummy. So let's go over here. Whoops. I'm just dragging over that. We'll actually increase that letting there. What I'm doing, and then let's go down to the bottom here. Select over Mummy, and let's make that much bigger. Here we go. So we got a treatment like that. Okay. Ooh, I like that. It's nice. Now let's take a look at the kerning, because you can't just assume that it's going to work. So that's why every time, even if you type it each time and then pick a different font, you're going to find that you'll probably need to go in there and adjust the kerning and look at trying to make the spaces in between appear similar or the same. All right, so we're going to make this a little wider. We didn't have to do much there. Maybe one. Tell you what, I'm going to spread out E a little bit too, like that. And then what I might want to do is I might want to, oops, I'm going to select over the if I can. So when you get the leading so tight, it's hard to select the different lines. I'm going to bring this down to 25. Ooh, and see that fits right in there with that M, which is great because that's one of the things you want to do with when you're designing is aligning. You know, thinking about how each letter is aligned. And so I've got the very small, and it's being aligned with this M, this big broad M. Okay, so let's zoom out here. I think we're pretty much finished with that one. Okay, so we'll have that treatment there. Okay, so let's do one more. We'll look for another serif font. And one of the things is when we're doing this is we're looking for fonts that will complement and work well with the image. And we're also looking for fonts that are easily readable. That's so key. The font needs to be readable. Okay, so first of all, let's go and we'll play around with, just pick a different font here, and then we'll play around with the hierarchy of everything. So let's go, and I think I picked, because I think this is on most computers will have Palatino. Perpetua. Wow, I like that. Maybe I want to use that. Yeah. I was looking for Palatino. Palatino linotype. Ooh, that's got a nice look to it. And we'll do a bold. Okay. There we go. Now let's play around some more. Now I've got this thing going on where the is much smaller and the M is much larger. But what I would really like to do, let's play around with if we can get in here and select the. Let's select that. All right. So what I'm going to need to do is let's adjust the kerning. I mean, not the kerning, the leading. We'll adjust the leading so that it's a little separated here for a second, so I can go in here and try to get the. There it is. I got it. Now I'm going to make this much smaller here. Okay. And I'm wondering about maybe just making it all caps. Like that. All right. And then maybe, let's see about that. I'm thinking that that will be lowercase. Not mummy. Okay, mummy. Okay, now let me make the Y here. I'm just playing around, see what we do here, because it's always cool to play around with type. We'll make this Y much bigger. We'll make it almost as big as the M. And actually, I would like it to be the same. Okay, so the M is 65, and the Y is, let's make the Y at 65 too. There we go. All right, now we're going to need to maybe make lowercase letters a little larger. But then we're gonna have to bring in the kerning. So I'm using my when you see this jump here, I'm not manually doing that. I'm already on the line. What I'm doing is I'm using my keyboard, the arrows. So once I get to where I'm at, then I hold down my Alt key, and then I can make this much tighter here. Okay. All right. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make our M and our Y a little smaller. So we'll make that down to maybe 60. Make this down to 60. Okay. Let me see about playing around here. There we go. Kind of like that. Now let's select all this, and we're going to make that. Yeah, there we go. And just play around with that. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to select over the, make it a little bit more smaller. Let's make it down to 20, like that. And then we'll select the whole thing. And I think we could just select like this, and then adjust the kerning. Yeah. So I didn't have to scroll over. So I'm playing around. I'm just playing around here. See what looks good. See how it reads. Okay. And we'll zoom out here and see what that looks like. So we've got the mummy in several different ways. Now, mind you, I've already done this. I'm just showing you how to do it. And so the ways I've done it here, I like much better. But I did kind of like what I was doing with the impact. But see, I just reversed that. All right. So anyway, what I want to do is I want to show you about. Well, first of all, here's the situation. You're going to be sending me this file that you create that looks like this, but if you send it to me like this, there's a good chance that whatever fonts you've used, I don't have. And so it's going to really, and when you open up a file that has fonts that are not installed, it really screws the text up, makes it look horrible because it'll substitute the font. Well, there's a way around that in Illustrator, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn our text outline. But what I like to do is this. I like to duplicate this layer. So this is my type layer here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this type layer, and if you want to name it type, you can, but I'm just keeping it layer 6. Now this is layer 6 copy. We're going to turn off layer 6 by turning off the eye, okay? And we're going to select all of our text like this. Might be a little hard to see. Let's double click this. So if you're having trouble seeing it, remember we can always change. Yeah, there we go. We can always change the selection color of each layer. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Type, and we're going to go to Create Outlines. And what it's done is it has altered the type, so now it's no longer text, it's shapes. Now this is not advisable to do if you've got a whole page of text, it's paragraphs, but it's great for doing with titles, okay? Because now it's changed this into, I'm just moving things around here, thinking for a second. It changes everything into these vector shapes. So if we look at it like this, see that? Now let's go to the other layer. We'll turn this off for a second. You can see the difference here. All right, so that's a font. Those are the fonts. And this is the outline text. And so the great thing about the outline text is when you send me your file, I can see what you've done with the text, okay? And one of the reasons why I do this both ways and leave this copy is if I'm working and I go, okay, I got to adjust the kerning on this again because something's off. I missed it or something. Then I want to change the font. Then I can go and change the font on the layer that has the actual fonts, and then I can duplicate that again and create outlines again. It's much easier to edit that way. Okay. So anyway, one of the things I want to point out was this. You can't put a gradient in a font. It won't pick it up. Won't do it. But let's go up to here and let's select this now and get our eyedropper. And see, now I can put that gradient into that font, which is also great because this is how we can get a gradient into text. Okay, so we're going to use our gradient tool, and we're going to drag at the same time and hold down our shift key when we're doing it, and we get something kind of like that. All right, ooh, that looks nice. Okay, now let's do the same thing over here. Now, mind you, we needed the main selection tool, not the direct selection tool, so we can do this. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually click in, maybe, I don't know, try this one. Okay. Now remember, this had the radial gradient. So let's go to our gradient tool, and we want to kind of click and drag from this way. You can't really see what's happening. I'm going to do command, yeah, there we go. Now you can see what the effect is when I did that. All right, so I just held on the Alt key. So that changes that. Now you can always, if you want to, play around, maybe add a little bit more magenta to that. We'll hit the Alt key again, see what that looks like. Maybe this will get a little lighter, so we'll take the magenta out of that a little bit. See what that looks like. We can always drag this again, because we want it to go in the same direction as the other, as the gradients of the background there. We can always bring that over a little bit more. There we go. All right, so let's take a look at that, and that's what we have. Okay, and you can play around with that all you want to make it look great. But this is our first exercise, and what you want to do is we want to save it and put your name on it, and you would put your last name, exercise 2 or EX2, and then you'll upload it to the submission folder. Okay,